Welcome to Journalist Roundtable. I'm Corey Clark in Philadelphia. And joining us this week from Politics PA, Steve Ulrich, from WESA Radio, Tom Riese, and from the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, Ryan Deto. Ryan, let's start with you. We're just a few days away from the election, finally, and I think top of mind for a lot of people is how everything is going to play out on Election Day with counting of votes and knowing actually who won. You wrote about how good Allegheny County is at counting those votes and getting it done fast. Why are they so good?
Yeah, I think they're arguably the best county in the state at counting their votes. They after 2020, the county manager really was very concerned about getting those votes counted in really fast, considering all the chaos we had after the 2020 election. And really the big reason is that basically every single county employee comes in on election day. You can come in at 7 o'clock and you can start tabulating all the votes. And they tabulate them. They have a whole operation. They bring in, people who work in the health department, people who work in the, human services department, everyone really. And they count every single vote. They get it ready. And, last election, 2023 election, which is obviously lower turnout, but they had basically every single mail-in vote, virtually all of them, counted and tabulated into the system like 13 seconds after the polls closed. It was quite remarkable. They expect a very similar result this year. I think they have just got it down to a science in terms of how to count him. And not only did they have all these people come in, they also invested in those really high tech, sorting machines. I think one of our staffers just went to look at our election warehouse yesterday, and there's video of them like going through it. It's kind of like a super fast version of like that, like almost like a factory in terms of just how fast they sort through them all. So invest in technology and then bring in the workforce to count them all, basically, is how Allegheny County has gotten it done.
How do other counties follow this model? Steve, you mentioned before we were on air that you had a previous life as an election official. How does your old job compare to what he just said that Allegheny County has?
I was the election director in York County in 2020 and 2021. And one of the things that I think gets a bad rap is Zuckerbucks. The money that was earmarked toward various election offices allowed counties to purchase new equipment, the mail sorters that Ryan mentioned, even something as simple as letter openers. The fact that Pennsylvania is not allowed to pre-canvass mail ballots creates an issue. In York County, Election Day was a holiday, so similar to Allegheny, York County employees came from all over to assist with the opening of the outer envelope, the opening of the secrecy envelope, the smoothing out of the ballots, to get it ready for tabulation. I think every one of the 67 counties, maybe I shouldn't speak for Philadelphia or Allegheny given their size, but I think a lot of county commissioners want to see their county election staffs be the first ones to complete the results and get them out there to the general public. But our stance was always, we will do our job accurately as quickly as possible. So I commend Allegheny County, and I think the others are catching up slowly but surely.
What about the fact that we have to wait until the polls close before they actually get counted? It's not like that everywhere, and the legislature didn't act on it. What's the holdup there? What are the concerns on either side of that?
I think the biggest thing for counties is the fact that at 8 o'clock is typically when, if you've already tabulated all the no excuse absentee mail ballots, that is the first dump of results that comes out. So you're going to see a natural blue wave because Democrats use mail balloting more than Republicans. Then election offices move to election day voting. That is the next thing they do. So because Republicans have, over the last 3 elections, shown a propensity to turn out more on election day than Democrats, you're going to see whatever margin Democrats may hold in a number of races shrink if not disappear. After the election day vote is taken care of, then counties move on to the mail ballots that were turned in or received on election day. So in a lot of respects, election offices are conducting 3 separate elections leading up to election day. You have the time when you can walk into your election office, apply, fill out a mail-in ballot and turn it back in. You have those folks who are mailing their ballot in, and then you have the election day concern. So the idea of trying to tabulate all these things and have a result by 1 or 2 in the next morning, I think is silly. And I just think, given the data that we've seen, the polling that we've seen, how close Pennsylvania is going to be, I certainly don't expect to have things for a few days afterwards.
Steve, you mentioned turnout. You wrote about the latest F&M poll, and that turnout is going to be the key in this election. But are there any indications on who is going to turn out?
Corey, I think one of the things that we're really looking at, the Franklin and Marshall poll showed among likely voters, Donald Trump led Kamala Harris. Among registered voters, they were neck and neck. And I actually talked to the pollster, Burwood Yost, at Franklin and Marshall about this. He said that shows you how important turnout is going to be. So now we start looking at, okay, are we going to see a lot of young people turn out between 18 and 29? We know older folks are going to turn out, but the young folks are always the ones that I think political operatives, political parties look at. And I'm really focusing some of my attention, although Erie and Northampton County are considered the bellwethers, really taking a look at Center County and where Penn State's located. Will we see the number of young women who may turn out to vote to protect their reproductive rights? Is that offset by the number of young college men who may be perceived as part of the bro vote? We just don't know who's going to turn out on election day. What we do know is it's expected to be 70 degrees and sunny, and there's no excuse not to come out and vote.
Tom, Steve mentioned the abortion issue. You've been covering the Attorney General race as we talk about some of these races on the ballot. How has that been playing out in the Attorney General's race? Because you have a couple of candidates with different stances when it comes to how they should enforce abortion laws.
Yeah, there have been some measured responses, and there have been some pretty outright, outspoken responses on that. Eugene DePasquale, the Democrat running for that state office, has been pretty open, speaking in debates and with media about his family needing to have a procedure that saved his wife, and they went on to have more children. He says he will never prosecute a woman or a doctor for having an abortion in Pennsylvania. On the other side, Republican Dave Sunday says he supports and fully supports the current laws in Pennsylvania, and he says he doesn't believe the state will ever change its laws. So he sounds like, he's for what's happening right now. He doesn't believe there will be changes in the future. On some other answers he gave during the debate, though, it does seem like sort of a tricky position to be in as an attorney general. He says, he'll uphold whatever laws the state has. He's going to defend the state's laws. So I think some people have hoped he would give maybe a more outspoken answer like DePasquale, though Sunday does note that he believes an abortion is an okay procedure to have here in Pennsylvania. So it's sort of almost like walking a fine line, but I think some people interpret it differently.
Yeah, and the role of the Attorney General itself has sort of come up, right? Some say it shouldn't be called the top cop because there's so much more involved than just law enforcement.
That's right. We asked the Attorney General's office, which has a number of divisions, what percentage it makes up their criminal division. They said it's about 60%. So while that's the majority, the Attorney General does everything from defend the state in court, from the federal government, protects some civil rights, goes after environmental crimes. And that's something that the DA's association, the statewide association that I spoke with, said, yeah, that's not something that our offices can handle. We might not have an expert in environmental crimes. So we either need to speak with the state attorney general's office to help us out with that, or just, they just defer to them. A few people have brought up the top cop nickname in this race, even during the Democratic primary. I think some other candidates were going after Eugene DePasquale because he's never been a career prosecutor, and some of the Democratic nominees or candidates had. That's something that Dave Sunday has also mentioned, that he's been the York County DA for a number of years now, and says he'd be tough on crime, and that would help him as the state AG. A lot of people have heard top cop. I think when we hear about presidential candidate Kamala Harris, when she was the AG of California, and I think naively when I was younger and I heard that, I was like, was she ever a police officer? I think I was confused. I'm not sure if other people shared that, but we wanted to look into that a little bit.
Gotcha. Tom, you as we talk about some of these other races, Pittsburgh has had no shortage of visits from candidates at the top of the ballot. Talk about some of the events that you've covered with the presidential candidates and what the reception has been like for both Harris and Trump and even their surrogates.
Sure. So I'm based in South Central Pennsylvania for WESA. I was out in Pittsburgh on Labor Day when both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were there at a labor union hall. People noted that Biden had made his announcement of running for president at the same place, so sort of treated it as like a passing the torch. Though yesterday I was in Harrisburg, where Kamala Harris was at the Farm Show complex in Harrisburg. I did get to see Trump there earlier this year. They were in a separate section of the Farm Show complex, but they rallied thousands of people, both of them. Trump had a little bit bigger of a space to welcome people in the space he used, but definitely a lot of people fired up on both sides, making a lot of noise and wearing all the gear.
Ryan, you've also been covering these campaigns. What have you seen out in Pittsburgh way?
Yeah, I mean, just like we've been everywhere. I mean, they've been everywhere, to be honest. I mean, Trump has mostly spent his time kind of in the outer lying counties, around Pittsburgh, which is where his Republican base is. Johnstown, Greensboro. Westmoreland County, Butler County. Butler County twice, obviously, because of the historic event that occurred there. His second Butler rally was his biggest. I think there's 21,000 there. But his last Westmoreland County rally was only about 3,000. So I don't know if there's a fatigue or something, or maybe they've seen him enough. I think he's held like 6 or 7 rallies here, in the area. Harris, on the other hand, has kind of done more. I guess her biggest rally was like, the one with Biden, at the Union Hall down in the city south side. And I think they've been a little bit more intimate. They still get a lot of attention as well, and a lot of fired up people. I can personally say that every time we write a story about Harris in the area, I get a lot of messages from people being like, "Is this open to the public? Can I come? Can I arrive?" And I can't help them. I don't even know. And so I think we're kind of coming down to the last day. Again, we're hearing some reports that Harris is going to be here on Monday, and Trump could be here on the same day. Apparently, I don't know. It's a little up in the air, but kind of all comes down to it, like fighting over these Pittsburgh voters.
Corey, if I can chime in
Steve,
as well, I've seen Trump in Lancaster, seen Harris and Liz Cheney in Malvern, saw Josh Shapiro, Raphael Warnock, Jeff Duncan also came to Lancaster. Saw just on Monday, Harris had a rally at Temple University, brought out Barack Obama, Bruce Springsteen, and John Legend. So everyone's reaching into their bag of tricks, pulling out everything they can possibly do. And one of the things I'm really interested in as well is, do these rallies and the late money that is generated, does that give us an indication of what might be happening? you look back to Monday's report of contributions, FEC requires this. Kamala Harris brought in $11 million on Monday. Donald Trump brought in about $175,000. Does it mean anything? Does late money coming in show a shift in the odds? I don't know, but I did find it interesting.
Steve, talk about how these enthusiastic presidential campaigns might affect some of the other races. I think in that F&M poll, people weren't splitting tickets a lot. So could Casey and McCormick maybe see benefits from this? They haven't really been out with these presidential campaigns. How are they handling visibility when it comes to the top of the ticket?
That's a great question, Corey. The Franklin Marshall poll did show that you don't see many Harris, McCormick, Trump, Casey voters. It does look like the U.S. Senate race could very well rest in the balance of how the presidential race turns out. CNN came out with a poll yesterday showing Bob Casey with a 3-point margin over Dave McCormick that still falls in the margin of error of all the polls. So what we've seen throughout the election cycle is Bob Casey's been able to hold Dave McCormick at arm's length with every poll. McCormick, the Republican challenger, has not led Casey at any point. But if you follow trend lines, you do see the Republican closing the gap. Now, Casey he did show up on Monday night with Barack Obama to campaign in Philadelphia. But you're right, you haven't seen him really jumping in with Harris events as well. McCormick has tried to be more visible at Republican rallies with Donald Trump, but I think the U.S. Senate race certainly could come down to who wins at the top of the ticket.
Has there been a lost opportunity maybe for the Harris campaign with Joe Biden's popularity here in Pennsylvania, or was that a calculated move? Did they not want to take a chance? He did have a gaffe the other day with that some interpreted him as calling Trump supporters garbage in reference to the comment that was made at Madison Square Garden. Should Biden have been more involved?
I get the sense that the Harris campaign has basically tried to hold off Joe Biden. But Biden has been very vocal about wanting to assist the campaign, but I do think that Harris has basically said, thanks, we have you in our back pocket in case we need to pull you out. And then in a totally unscripted moment, right after the address on the ellipse, which was received very well by most people, Biden had his gaffe, and I think that's really what the Harris campaign is most afraid of. Ryan, Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, Joe Biden was here last weekend, here in Pittsburgh, and he kind of did his very typical thing here, which is meeting with local labor, unions who I think within those labor unions he is pretty popular, and pretty beloved. Now polling overall, the overall state shows his approval rating is pretty low here, lower than Trump's. So I think that is the kind of game you play. Like how does he help those kind of pro-union Southwestern Pennsylvanians who maybe are a little bit more hesitant towards Harris, but at the same time, it's like, do you really want to put him in this huge spotlight? So maybe that is Biden's strategy is to do kind of smaller union events. But if he has a gaffe, then it really can kind of set things back.
Yeah, I used to be based in Scranton, and he's been there a number of times. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him there again before Tuesday. But I think people there are already sort of decided how they feel about the man. There is a street named after him. He can go about memory lane stuff. People really, I think, like that. But I agree that maybe the distance might be benefiting the Harris campaign at this point.
We have seen McCormick at a couple of Trump events, but it seems like these senatorial campaigns are trying to forge their own path and not tie themselves too closely to the top of the ticket. But have you guys seen the spot where Bob Casey sort of ties himself to Trump on the fracking issue. How big of an issue is fracking in this campaign?
I can talk about this one. Out here in southwestern Pennsylvania, it's always been a kind of enigma to me covering it as how big of an issue it is. Like politically, it always seems to be a big issue. If you talk about it, especially the trades, all the building trades labor unions here are very pro fracking. The industry executives out here are extremely pro fracking. It always becomes a political splash kind of thing that each of these groups really want to make a big thing, but I don't know how it really transfers to votes. It's very confusing. There's some communities that are very anti-fracking. They don't want it happening in their backyards, essentially, and it's really confounding, I'd say. But how each presidential campaign has, and the Senate campaigns have handled it is that they've basically said it's a good thing. Let's keep it going. I think we're at record levels of natural gas production in Pennsylvania and have been since 2021. So I think that's kind of, they each want to, forge their own path. I think Casey wants to show, hey, if Harris is considered flip-flopping, I've never flip-flopped on this. I support this. Those Fayette County, those Greene County Democrats that, are definitely, like President Trump, he wants to show, hey, I've done this too. McCormick wants to do the same thing. He wants to try to win those people over. Hey, Casey's not like, I'm better than Casey. Look, I'm tied to President Trump. Try to win those voters over. And I think it is just kind of that battle of the building trades, I think, is such a huge thing here. And Casey's got a lot of support there and has for a long time, but I think McCormick is trying to cut into it.
Ryan, that's a great point. Tom and I both reside in South Central Pennsylvania. We don't talk fracking in this area. We know how important it is to the western part of the state, certainly, but I think I could walk outside my front door, ask a neighbor exactly what is fracking, and they probably couldn't explain it. So what I've really noticed in that race is the gender issue that's been raised, whether it's transgender, whether it is the corrective procedures that supposedly took place in prisons, whether it's allowing transgender to participate in girls' sports. I think really, at least in our area, I think that's resonated more.
Yeah, I could jump
Steve,
in
before
briefly.
we
I know
run
in
out.
Eastern Pennsylvania, sorry about that, just north of Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, some of the, I guess, probably second to southwestern Pennsylvania, fracking is really big. And there have been some of the most outspoken advocates opposing it, rather, in Susquehanna County and Bradford County. But I think the issue brought to the national level too, even above the Senate race here in PA. I'm wondering if people in Las Vegas or in Seattle are like, what is fracking? Why does this matter? I think the perception, though, especially when people talk about the hundreds of thousands of jobs that maybe once were a part of this, or if they actually include like the drivers or the maybe businesses that help the workers of the fracking industry, are maybe a little bit slimmer. And I've seen some really good reporting out of the Allegheny Front and WHYY, their environmental reporters that talk about maybe the numbers are maybe only like 10,000 or less. I could be getting that number wrong, but how many of those people are voting in the state? How many of them maybe live elsewhere and are working in PA?
Yeah, it's really more of when the build out of all the wells was being built in the 2010s. That's when we had a lot of the jobs. Now those wells are built out and they're just producing natural gas, and so it becomes more of a like, okay, do we need to build pipelines to export more of this? Do we need to open up the LNG facility in Philadelphia to export more out of the country because we're producing so much? But again, this is like really in the weeds. This is like industry executive talk and building trades union members talk. And so it's funny because all you really hear, even in rallies out here in Western Pennsylvania at Trump rallies, is unleash energy. And that's pretty much it. That's the lingo that they use. It does not get in depth, but I will say that Trump people do talk about that a lot. It is we need to unleash the energy. And it's really funny because every time they say that, I always have to write in my stories that, well, we're at record levels of it right now. I mean, I guess you could unleash it more, but it's been unleashed. And so I don't, it's going to be, I really don't know if that has it's so hard to tell if that has a huge play on the election. The campaigns talked about it. I really think it's just because the building trades union in Pennsylvania are incredibly powerful politically. And so how do you win those people over? How do you get those union members to come out door knock for you? I think the Biden campaign before and the Harris campaign since have done a good job of winning those people over. Yeah, they've kind of dominated those, those union members.
Tom, before we run out of time, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about, you had written about the state legislature and how that hangs in the balance, and this election could swing it. Can you talk about how tight that is and how that looks going into Election Day?
Sure. And please feel free to jump in, Steve and Ryan, as it's still a pretty new beat to me, but I know Democrats have a very, very slim margin just in the House, and they're hoping to make up some ground in the Senate, where I think if they can gain 3 seats, they would effectively be tied there with Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis being able to break ties, not on legislative matters, but procedural matters. Some of the spotlight races I know are in Western PA. We have a state House member, Nick Piscitano, running for a Senate seat that's being vacated by a retiring senator. That one is really being watched. Also in the Harrisburg area, State Rep Patty Kim is doing a similar move where she hopes to move into the Senate in an area that Dems hope it will be a bluer area when it might have been purple since. I'm not sure what you have heard, Ryan and Steve. Are people feeling confident about maintaining the margins that are there, or they're switching things up?
I think in the 2 southwestern seats we have here, I don't know. I think it's a little bit of going to be that down ballot effect. What's the top of the ticket going to do, and then how people are going to split down ballot. I know that the Mon Valley seat is Republicans are really eyeing that. They've made a lot of grounds in the Mon Valley because these former kind of Democratic areas, industrial Democratic areas that are kind of sprinting to the right. But at the same time, that district was redrawn, and it includes a lot more kind of Pittsburgh suburbs that are pretty consistently blue. And the other one on right next to it is another kind of swing seat. The Republican has been running really strong there. He's gotten a lot of labor endorsement, which is always a really good sign for them. So I'm a little skeptical that I think the Senate's going to be able to flip without winning that seat.
All right, guys, I think we are going to have to end it there. Thanks to our guest this week, Steve Ulrich from Politics PA, Tom Riese from WESA Radio, and Ryan Deto from the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. And thank you for watching. I'm Corey Clark. Good night.